Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another exciting edition of Tough Talking Thursday on Focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In tonight's edition of Tough Talking Thursday, we're going to be examining the mantra that Bo will eat. And remember now, I didn't put the T there. That Bo will eat. So, what is book? What does it mean to eat book? This is Tough Talking Thursday, and I'm excited to have the chief political analyst who's joining us from the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection, Mr. Wilmot Kunney. Mr. Kunney, welcome to Focus on Liberia Tough Talking Thursday. You muted yourself, Mr. Kunney. On mute, please.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure always coming on the platform to discuss national issues.
Thank you, Mr. Kunney. Next, I have the political analyst, Mr. Mohamed Sherif, a proud product of Waplo Institute from Kilipo, Kanwekan. Comrade Sherif, welcome to Focus on Liberia Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you, Dennis. It's great to be here as always.
Thank you. Last and definitely not the least is someone we talk to behind the scene. We call him the FOL consultant, Mr. Ahmed K. Sirleaf. Mr. Sirleaf, welcome to Focus on Liberia Tough Talking Thursday.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be back here on FOL and an honor to be on with Mr. Sherif and Mr. Kunney.
Thank you so much. We are waiting for FOL public policy analyst, Mrs. Fahnbulleh, who's going to be joining us in a minute. But Mr. Sirleaf, this is your first time on Tough Talking Thursday. This is where we talk tough. We don't beat about the bush. We talk tough. And at the end of the show, we have our Tabata session because something always of Tabata nature happens in our country. So welcome all of you to Focus on Liberia. I want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. It's time to talk tough. Well, today we're going to be talking about something that you may have heard, and we say that both will eat. So that's the Liberian, you can call it slang. That's why I say we will be examining this mantra. What does it mean when we say that both will eat? First, let's do some definition here for those who may not be familiar with book. Book, and this is a literal translation because book is synonymous to education. So in my hometown, when they say this person is educated, the way to say is the person know book. So the person know book means the person is educated. So book equal education. Also, book means literally what it is, a book. So we can have a book. So book too in Liberia means book, and book in Liberia means education. Also, when we and to eat book, what do you mean? Food is what we eat. So to eat book is what we're going to be defining. But another form of eating book, when you memorize, when we used to study, they say, man, we're eating book today. Sometimes if you are very good at a subject like math, they say you eat math. And you can even take it a step further to compare it with something that all Liberians eat, kanya. So if you are told that you eat math like kanya, mean you are very good at math. You eat history like kanya, you mean you are. And don't remember, we don't pronounce the T. It's E. That book we will eat. So in Liberia, we always hear this thing about that book we will eat. In 2018, when President Bush visited Liberia, he donated some furniture, or he pledged that after he left, that was donated. So he donated furniture and like 1 million pieces of book. And after the war, they were expecting money. So people asked, what will Bush that book we will eat? So tonight we're going to be looking at this. That book we will eat. What does it mean? Where does it come from? And so we're going to be looking at this. Right now, we're being joined by Mrs. Fahnbulleh. Welcome to Focus on Liberia.
It's good to be here.
Right. So, our first order of business, and our viewers, please, we want you to chime in. What does it mean? So let's go around the room, starting with Mr. Kunney. Mr. Kunney, what is your understanding of that book we will eat, and where do you think this is coming from?
Well, thank you for starting off with the with the definition of book vis-a-vis education. And as you correctly pointed out, book here can be literally the physical book that we all see around here, where knowledge and other information are contained. That's book. But if you talk about education, it is that total process of developing our minds, developing our faculties, and using them effectively for the sole purpose of our betterment, for the betterment of society. So education has its obvious benefit to benefit the society at large, to promote better living, to create an environment in which people are aware of their rights and responsibilities. So all of these things are all forces of education. And, they come in so many ways. There are formal education, there is informal education. And all of these things combine to develop our minds, to develop our faculties, to develop ourselves. So in summary, that's my understanding of education. It has all of the elements of knowledge. It has all the elements of training. It has all of those things that are part of it. And so when the question is asked, that book will eat, let go to the ordinary Liberian English, that book will eat. I think the best way to address that question is, what is the source of that question? Why are people asking that question? And we should ask that being fully aware of the definitional issues I've provided.
Right.
Education is to better ourselves. Education is to better the society. So when the people ask the question that book will eat, I think our analysis and our research should actually go into why are people asking that question.
And before we get there, Mr. Kunney,
know.
what does it mean if you were explaining to your friend at the Philadelphia City Corporation that book will eat? What will you say the people are talking about? Briefly, what does that mean?
In summary, it's like the people are not seeing the benefit of education. They're not enjoying the benefits of education. So they ask, you keep talking about this education, but we're not seeing the benefits. So that question is not being anti-education, but that question is basically questioning the whole idea that we are not seeing any benefit from this education. It's only because the people are not benefiting from education. That's why they ask. But it's not because the people are against education.
You're right. Thank you. Another guy here, eat policy like Kanye too, and international issues. Mr. Sirleaf, that book will eat. What does it mean? And what do you think that idea or that question? What is the source? As Mr. Kunney said.
Thank you for to Mr. Kunney for starting it. I think when our people talk about that book will eat, and there's another one we hear, what in book people not do for us, right? So that book will eat is the education side of things, the lack of I guess education as utility to society. So bread and butter issue, how's policy, how's governance delivering for the people, those in authority, those who are seen to be elite, who are educated usually, and who these book people. So what have they done for us, or what are they doing for us? So I would say if policy fails, or governance fails, or government fails people, or an individual leader, or someone who is in authority, who is seemingly an educated person, who knows book and who should be utilizing that education, that book to deliver. If once the people are now seeing all of that, then they can say that book will eat. And now, and talking about education and this particular mantra, it can be in an individualized context. It can also be societal. So there's a societal iteration. So just as education itself has different theories. One of the theories to talk about is the human capital theory. So you have social theory, Marxist and functionalists. We can talk about some of those. But in terms of, let's say, a family member who may be educated or who may have all kinds of expectations coming towards the direction because they're educated, they have certain skill set, and people expect that they will then translate that education into real bread and butter, solving problems for people, for the family, for the community, for the country. When that is not coming forth and they're not seeing those benefits coming, be it, again, individual or someone in government or the government itself, then they can ask the question that book will eat, what in book people not do for us. That's my understanding to start off with.
Thank you. And our viewers start commenting already. Say, welcome, Madam Cole. The only iron lady I know can eat cereal book. Cole, that book will eat? What does that mean? Now they say you can eat cereal book. So you're in the fries. You are muted.
So book, in the general sense, being a code word for education, for knowledge, for information, the answer is absolutely yes. Book is exactly how and what people eat. Whether it be an oral book, a written book, whether it be collective memory of a culture, everything you learn is education. And even knowing what to eat is part of your education as a human being and your development as a human being. So nobody develops or survives without knowledge that's built upon through generations. Fortunately, human beings have evolved to a point where we have scripts and we can write and retain more information to pass down and share with one another as we learn. So the process of writing and collecting knowledge on text doesn't change the fact that it is what it is, what it's always been, which is information and enlightenment. Knowledge is power. It is a survival skill. Human beings, our greatest attributes as living beings is our intellect. We're not very strong. We have no tough hides. We don't have claws. We don't run as fast as a cheetah. We can't, we're not large like whales. We can't hold our breath for hours. We can't do any of these magical things that other creatures in creation can do. But what we have is a mind that has a capacity to retain a whole lot of information, more information than any of us will ever be able to obtain in our lifetimes. And that is what book is. Book is knowledge. Book is information. And that is the purpose of being human. If you're not a thinking person, you don't even exist. And so the misguided notion that because something is documented, it's not important, or because maybe I'm not as literate as the next person, I have to discount that. But the understanding of what exactly education is, I think is something that needs to be presented, differently to the society, and people need to understand its life skills. And the other thing is Western education is also a product of African intellectualism and African educational philosophy. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but people tend to think that education in the modern sense of what we title as Western education is something foreign, that is not of Africa, and the opposite is true.
Thank you. Mr. Mohamed Sherif, that book will eat. Have you heard that before?
Yes, I
Where
have.
have you heard this? And what you think they're talking about when they say that? Or maybe you yourself have said it. I don't know.
I don't I don't know if I've said it, maybe jokingly or whatever, but that book will eat, colloquially speaking. So when you spell that word, you spell that sentence is D-A, da, B-O-O-K, book. Well, they get the book part. We will eat, and then E is E-A, a book will eat. So it's a complete denigration of education. What it does mean is an assault on education, intellectualism, and rational thought. It wasn't always that way. I know there was a time that educated people in our local rural villages were the ones who were listening to radio, were the ones who were perhaps reading the newspaper and conveying these messages to their parents, to their neighbors. I speak of this in a personal way, as a personal experience that my brother would do from time to time. My late brother Abu, and so basically, up to the time that I'm referring to, teachers were respected. Both people, educated people, were held in high esteem, and so when we get into the 1980s with the military coup, there was an assault on education. So what you saw was the military attack on intellectualism. Teachers were harassed, and student leaders were put in jail in maximum security prison in Bella Yala and places like Barclay Training Center. And there was a complete attack on intellectualism, on free speech, all of which set the stage for where we are now. You get into the Civil War, and you had gun toters, starting with the NPFL, that launched an all-out assault on education. So our libraries were burned down, our school buildings were burned down, our books were used as toilet papers. Dennis, our library in Zweju, books were stolen. Books that I used to read, books that I fed on, were burned, and some of them were used as toilet papers, and some of them were used as papers, for color sellers. And so color were donated, were given to color sellers and stuff like that. So, so again, as I said, as you get into the Civil War, there was a complete breakdown of law and order and a complete breakdown of respect for education. So education held no meaning to the young guys who were taking guns, who were killing people, who were killing teachers, who were burning school buildings, who were burning libraries and books and stuff like that. And so education had no meaning when, professors were killed. I remember I was in Guinea when a classmate came by and said, "Do you know Prof. Dunn? Prof. Dunn is dead, and he was killed by the rebels." And just we're talking about that, and he said, "Well, Yekison was also killed." So I'm just giving you this as an example. You can cite this in several other institutions of learning where teachers were killed, students were killed, books were, libraries were vandalized, and school buildings were vandalized. So now you get into this era. These young people nowadays have no value, have no respect for book. So, you talk to them in a way and they say to you, well, that book will eat. And so right now, we have a leader who refused to appear for any sort of debate. He did not communicate his vision to the Liberian people in a way that will make any coherent sense to be elected. So he also denigrated education. His people, even Mr. Kunney himself, you can hear him say, hey, this is the intelligence. So you see this assault on the intelligentsia. So this is an assault on the intelligence all across the board now. So people are telling you, if they're not telling you that Bogo will eat, they will tell you the intelligentsia is not worth anything. And yet they themselves, the leaders of these attacks are also seeking these degrees. They're seeking, master's degrees. They're seeking honorary degrees. Like George Weah now is called Dr. George Howard Taylor is called Doctor. So it is incoherent what they're doing. But in a nutshell, this is exactly how I will interpret that Bogo will eat.
Thank you, Mr. Sherif. If you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia, and it's Tough Talking Thursday. Where else do you want to be than right here? So, right off the bat, our viewers are weighing in. Sam Wallow says, these slogans are the direct result of the massive failures of the self-proclaimed educated, experienced past leaders of Liberia. Jimmy Eastman, that Bogo will eat means education does not necessarily put food on the table. When baby hungry, Bogo will not its stomach. And the last person here still on this, Alexander Hayes, that bogu will eat simply means stop speaking big English. It cannot fill my stomach. Mr. Kunney, I too, I don't agree with Mr. Sherif necessarily that this is an assault. I saw the grin of your face, and you do not believe, based on this, that this is an assault on education or on intellectualism. It is simply saying education, they are not feeling the benefits of education. I want you to speak to that because you said that. So, and when you were smiling when Mr. Sherif was talking, I know you have something in your belly. On mute, please. On mute, Mr. Kunney.
Mr. Sherif's view is exactly what I call the arrogance of the educated class. It is just the display of total arrogance. The people are frustrated. The people, the purpose of education, like we all stipulated to here, is to solve problems, is to make the society better, is to make life better, is to develop an educational citizenry, people that will know their rights, all of that. And when all of these things are lacking in the society, then the people begin to ask, the people's frustration with the failure of educated people that have led them over the decades from this question. And then we pick up this arrogance that even though we have failed you in leadership, but how dare you question our education? That is the arrogance. That is the arrogance. So let's go to basic definition. Education is supposed to solve our problem. Guess what national problem we've been trying to solve since independence? To feed ourselves, to be self-sustaining agriculture. It's like we're going to the moon. How many people, how many educated people have we now had at the Ministry of Agriculture for us as a society to come up with a plan to solve the issue of feeding ourselves?
So, Mr. Kunney, if I may jump in, so in your definition, education means Western education.
It means all types of education that should solve problems, that fail to solve problems, even in our traditional leadership. If the chiefs and the elders are not using the wisdom to solve the problems that face the traditional society, people will ask questions. And for us, the educator, for us to say, oh, wait, let's dig deeper into the frustration of our people because we're not solving their problem. We immediately say, oh, they're attacking education. All of the examples the brother gave is, flaw. All of the people that
let me bring in Mr. Sirleaf, because let's first resolve this critical question. Mr. Sherif sees this as an assault on education, and Mr. Kunney doesn't think so. He said, well, you are not understanding the pinch the people are feeling. Well, where do you stand on this, Mr. Sirleaf?
Well, I stand on both perspectives. Mrs. Sherif made some very valid points but I think that point was this idea of an assault on educated people, and that is true on education and learning, on the value of learning, was triggered by what Mr. Kunney is talking about. That's why I began with my introduction. I said it was policy failure, governance failure. If you can educate people, and education in this instance, we're assuming Western education, where you read text and acquire knowledge and develop skills, and you're able then to fully realize potential to benefit self and others in society. I'm speaking from that perspective of education. In that respect, I think that this mantra the people just didn't sit one day and say, well, we're denegating education. We don't love education. To the contrary, market women, very poor women in rural Liberia, in the marketplaces, in the street, who are selling in the streets of Liberia, everywhere, in our open markets, they historically have educated most of the country's middle class and the country's elite. And so those same people would not be the ones then to assault education or to denigrate education. However, if education hasn't benefited them, it doesn't seem to be solving the problems, this country's problem, be it through policy formulation and policy implementation, or just national governance. The type of society, by and large, our educated people have produced for our people is one of a welfare state, whereby everybody lives off of the state. And most of these educated people seek elected position and get in office, and then engage in rent seeking. They loot the country. They corrupt the whole system. And so you can understand why then somebody will look at educated people and the educated class as the class that has failed them. And therefore, the plenty of talking, the plenty of book they may be using, the sort of air of arrogance that people move around with, I'm this, I'm that, I'm better than you, doesn't solve the problem. And so then they're justified to say that book will eat. What can book people not do for us? Because then these very book people, we thought will go to school and solve problems, but they're creating more problems. So if one can look at it from those two perspectives, then I would say Mr. Kunney has a point, and so does Mr. Sherif.
Carl, you have your mother all the way in Memphis, sent you to school, and the expectation is after you graduate, you're going to come back and make their life better. Now they don't see you coming back and doing anything. They say, well, we sent our child to school and we're expecting our lives to be transformed by the education. Now we don't have it. So they tend to say, well, that book will eat. On the other hand, politicians say, well, since I'm not dead, I'm going to, and then book people or educated people came with this notion that we were not having democracy, things were bad in government. And then when they came and sold the idea to us, we went to war. Now here we are, things are falling apart. So the book people are responsible for what we are having today. Where do you think this whole idea of that book will eat is coming from? And where do you stand with the both views being expressed already?
Hang on 1 second. Mommy's doing something. Can you go sit down and play? Yes, go ahead.
And that is
I'm so sorry, guys.
No, that's understandable because
I have a lot of things going on around me. So one of my favorite books of all time that I read repeatedly is Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro. It's one of the most profound analysis of the situation that we were facing in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, and that we face to this day, which is that the way education is structured for Africans globally is not really set up for the benefit of African people, because we allow people who intend to exploit us to so-called educate us. Well, what are they going to do? They're going to teach us what they want us to know so that we can function in their interests. And that is exactly what we do. And it is something, the process, we loosely call, literacy education. We loosely call, obtaining degrees education. What I have been told by my mentors from childhood is that education is giving you, it's something that should empower you to be able to see the world through your own eyes and solve problems, find your own solutions, not just imitate and mimic educated people, but to actually be a thinking person for yourself. So we should ask ourselves when we have degrees, are we actually educated or are we imitating or mimicking people who are educated? The latter is often more true than not. And that's extremely unfortunate. It's evident in the way that we conduct ourselves, the misplaced jargon that we often use, the way that we describe ourselves in language used by other people to describe us. We don't even define ourselves. I mean, we're running around Africa still referring to us as ourselves as tribes and not as ethnic groups. You look at, 15 million Fulani people and say the Fula tribe. Nobody ever says the French tribe. This is miseducation. This is seeing the world through the eyes of people who have trained you and not educated you. So on the flip side, when people say, education has failed, education, the process by which people are educated is really miseducation. And that is the crux of a lot of our problems. If you're not truly educated,
are you saying we are not educated, we are miseducated? That's why we having this?
In general, absolutely. Absolutely. If I had gone to school and only expected to be filled by what I was given at the University of Minnesota, at the University of Wisconsin, well, forget about that. I mean, from kindergarten through 12th grade, if I was only filled by what the institutions wanted to fill me with, I wouldn't be who I am today. I think differently because I was fortunate enough to be educated by people who had enlightened themselves. And I was taught how to think, and I was taught how to see the world and have a perspective for my own benefit. And so when I read and I study things, I see and understand things for myself. I'm not just regurgitating what some scholar wrote. I read it and I'm able to comprehend through my own mind in my own context. And until Africans, Liberians specifically, start to see the world and analyze it in their own context, they're going to fail. I'll give you a quick example, then I'll get off my soapbox. So I had a discussion early this morning with someone, and they were talking about, they shared a video about Ivorian roads and how Ivorian infrastructure is so great and how Ivory Coast is so much better than Liberia. Liberians like to say this because, they don't want to look at the perspective of the average person living in Ivory Coast. They're seeing from Ivory Coast from the perspective of the infrastructure builders, who are the people who extract resources from Ivory Coast, who develop infrastructure for the purpose of extracting resources from the country, not for the purpose of helping people in the country. And so Ivory Coast has great roads and rails and ports because it is an extractive industry infrastructure system. And even Abidjan, those who are trained to work the mechanism surrounding the extraction industry, from office economics people, from accountants, all of these people that they use, it's a small percentage of the population. And then you've got the petty traders and the small business people, but for the most part, Ivory Coast still really benefits France and French people. The majority of the people, if you go to a village in Ivory Coast, it's not much different from a village in Liberia. And the reason is, again, it's not set up for Ivorian people to advance themselves the way that other people are allowed to advance themselves. One last thing Malcolm X always said, and I'm paraphrasing, but you have to be a fool to allow your enemy to educate your children. And that's what we've done repeatedly.
Mr. Sirleaf, call us introduce another aspect to that this is all miseducation. If we were educated properly, we're not even going to be saying this.
Dennis, I don't want people to think I'm saying everyone is miseducated. It is a very general statement. I'm saying in general terms, please. There are a lot of people who are open-minded and think for themselves. I'm just speaking in very general terms.
Right.
Well, I mean, I like that Cole also said that she went to the University of Minnesota, the University of Wisconsin. And so there are institutions and there are conventions in education, the way we work, the way we receive information and knowledge, the way we process knowledge. People will tell you, I went to a small liberal arts college, and they said that they say you come here, we train you to think for yourself. So that's what liberal art education is supposed to be, right? But yeah, I understand generally what Coach was saying, that the way we process information and think about ourselves and describe ourselves, our country, our society, things about us, and compare ourselves to other societies, perhaps we're not appreciating the assets and beauties and things that are beneficial to our society, to ourselves. So the thinking process in that sense, in that sort of educational process, yes, I agree. how our education, Western education, which we all went through. I went to University of Minnesota as well, and I'm still doing some work there. It's a Western, it's an education that has a standard, across a system, with a convention which you must conform to. If you don't conform to that, then you don't acquire the credential you went there to acquire. So you acquire this credential, yes, individually. What do you do with it? Did you acquire skills? Then what do you utilize those skills? So you will, in that respect, and I agree with the argument to a certain degree, but I disagree that we can say, and even in general terms, that, well, most of the people are miseducated because for instance, you allow your enemy to educate their child. Yes, I mean, you can be philosophical about this, but when our people say that book will eat, and to me, it really comes down to how people who have acquired Western education have performed or not performed, and solve problems or not solve problems.
So what are some of the problems we want education to solve? Because this is, according to you, this is the failure. People have expectations.
Yeah.
There are things that are expected from both people. So if both people are not doing them, they feel that, well, they have education or education is not benefiting us. So what are the expectations of the people who are asking this question that book will eat?
Well, education can develop the self. Of course, we start with the individual. There's a capital theory in education that, well, you educate, you acquire an education or motivation, at least to purchase an education in terms of Western education, is for social and economic mobility for the person themselves, and then they want to participate in the labor force, in the employment sector. What sort of skill did they acquire, right? And they're still thinking about themselves, but in the process, they're paying taxes, they're learning norms of society, and they're contributing to society in general. On the other hand, you contribute to society if you say you're in the public sector, you are a public official, an elected official. I think this is really where this particular mantra we're looking at comes from. And that's kind of the context I'm speaking from. We can talk about education generally. We can talk about education theory. What does education do for society? What does education do for a particular individual? However, if we came here to talk about, answer the question that book will eat, to me, that's really a critique of policy failure, a critique of governance failure, a critique of lack of innovation, lack of development of let's say, the economy. And so that people, in creating enabling environment where people can thrive, people are able to then to receive services that government is expected to provide. They can send their children to school themselves. They can go to a hospital. They can receive basic services from government and public sector. If they're not receiving those, and they see people who are in charge, are people who are quote unquote educated people, Western educated people, yes, then they're justified to ask you that book will eat, because we see the book is just benefiting you, your friends, and your family. It's not really extending to society. It's not extending to those of us who may not be considered book people, because then we didn't acquire that Western education that you have.
Mr. Sherif, you are discounting people who have this desire, or people who are feeling the pinch that the education or they have not really gotten the benefit from educated people. The things, their expectations are not being met. You are saying this is not the case. It's just a vilification of education. I want you to defend yourself.
I'm not discounting those people, but we all know the reality of the situation. The reality is you hear this that book will eat around election time, when we have individuals like George Weah, when we're critiquing individuals like George Weah, individuals like the Lord Mayor of Monrovia, Jefferson Kwiji, who is not smart, and he occupies a very strategic position in the Liberian governmental structure. When we are critiquing those kinds of individuals, you have their supporters. You have their supporters in the streets and other places saying, that book will eat. And, so George Weah, at the back of his mind when he was running for president, understood that the Liberian people, the bulk of his supporters, Mr. Kunney and others, didn't care whether he conveyed his thoughts to the Liberian people in a coherent manner. Forget coherent, whether in fact he appeared before the Liberian voters to say, this is my vision for Liberia. He didn't do that because his supporters said that book will eat. We're not eating book. He's educated, he's not educated, we will vote for him. So this is exactly what is going on. So don't let these guys, Mr. Kunney and others, mask what is going on. You hear this around election time that book will eat. So the supporters are telling you, we're not here to listen to you from the United States. We're not here to listen to you with all your book. Okay, we're not here to listen to you with all of the rational thoughts. We're not going to eat that. What we're looking for is someone like this who we believe can deliver. So that is, I think, what we need to dissect, but not, the fact that, someone is sitting in Calipo saying, well, I sent my son or daughter to school. Is he going to come back? Is he or she going to come back to benefit me? That is a given in the African society. There were people who sold coffee and cocoa to send their sons and daughters to school. The expectation is you are going to come back and give back to the family. You are going to come back and give back to society. So because of the fact that we don't have the luxury of a social security or some sort of social security safety net, we don't have those kinds of social security system that they have in the United States. We don't have the unemployment system that they have in the United States. So who are those? What is the institution? What is the one way that family members can benefit? Is that I'm going to send my son or daughter to school, and they're going to come back. When I get old one day, they're going to come back to take care of me. We don't send our people to nursing homes and stuff like that. We come back and take care of our moms and dad. So that expectation is always there. That doesn't have to be said, but this new reality,
Mr. Sherif, let me interject.
After the military revolution after the military coup of 1980, with this sort of assault on education, it continues right through this day.
Yeah, Mr. Sherif, and I'm glad you said that that it started, but it seemed to me that you are laying this solely at the feet of George Weah, like this, but that book he just started maybe 2017. That is not the case.
Dennis, I just told you that the evolution of this, the most recent emergence, modern emergence of the colloquial that book will eat began in the 80s. And so I just told you that, and I'm going to repeat it. And so we get to this moment, and we're critiquing someone who has never efficiently communicated. Listen, Dennis, we had a presidential candidate on this show last week who said you don't need a message. Great guy, fun guy, who said you don't need a message to be like the president of the Republic of Liberia. You know what? Maybe he knows something. He knows that some people are going to tell him that book will eat. We're not eating book. Let Dennis and Sherif them sit there, and talk about book. We're not eating book. Maybe he knows something that I don't know. Yeah. Maybe Mr. Kunney knows something that I don't know. But all I know is with this sort of endless attack on the so-called intelligentsia class, with this sort of endless attack on the so-called book people, it is just not ending. So there is something, and maybe they don't want to tell you what it is, but I'm here to tell you what it is. What it is that it's a consistent critique, a denigration of rational thought, literacy, and education, everything that should develop the Liberian nation state.
Well, Mr. Kunney, at the height of the Liberian Civil War, I've heard repeatedly, book people failed the country, book people spoiled Liberia. And what people were alluding to was the revolution in the late 1970s and early 1980s, or late 1970s, when the guy from PAL, UPP, PAL, and Moja, and they started with a new message that things are bad, the country, the taxes, and there was this agitation. So when people bought into it and they had the coup, people blamed them. They say, well, these book people spoiled the country. And then fast forward to Taylor used that very successfully, so that, as somebody said, to be able to, eliminate the intelligentsia class and bring up your own people. And so during the war, we heard people that he has groomed, some of whom he programmed to kill, said, "You killed my man, you killed my pa, I will vote for you. You killed myself, my spirit will vote for you." And this was an extension of that, what Mr. Sherif is referring to as the assault on education, literacy, and the intellectual class. Mr. Weir now brought that upon himself in 2005 during the election. He said, "What education do I need?" And this was a very good message. I love that too. He said, "What education do I need to know that there is trash here that need to clean it?" In other words, educated people have not been able to identify these problems. 2017, he repeated the message. I think it was in Ganta when he said, "Your book people, what did I do for you?" So I'm coming bookless. I want to put it that way. And I'm
Dr. Bookless.
So, Mr. Kunney, Mr. Weir too brought this upon himself, and people are saying it has an assault on education. What's your take?
Well, look, before I go to that, first of all, let me give a shout out to my sister Cor. Sometimes she takes us to a higher philosophical and intellectual level of these things. With the theory of the miseducation, I think it's an interesting theory to kind of review. And also to Brother Sirleaf, because the question that we've been asked here tonight, as to that book we eat, I think Mr. Sirleaf had provided a clear explanation on why people ask that question. We say education, basically the purpose of education is to gain knowledge that will better the society, that will better the citizens. So when people ask that question, Dennis, it's simply because policy and delivery, everything has failed the people. The people do not see the benefit of these policies. It's not an assault on education. Come on. Who has assaulted education in Liberia? You have children of market women and ordinary people struggling to send their people to school. You talk about assault on education. The very leaders that Brother Sirleaf cited, we also know the personal decision that they themselves made to go to school. Right. Even Samuel Doe, at the height of his dictatorship, was seeking knowledge. So there is no assault on education. We're talking about failure of policies here. The question we should ask ourselves is, what national problems have we been able to solve as a nation? I mean, let's pick any national issue. Is it healthcare? Is it education? Is it infrastructure development? Then the question is, then what is the result of our education? I mean, he's trying to make this thing all partisan and political. This is not a political discussion. We as a country need to ask ourselves. We can feed ourselves. We can cure our sick. We can build roads. We can't do any of these things. We have not solved any of these things, in a national way. Look at Ministry of Education. How many doctorate degree holders we have not sent to that Ministry of Education? How many doctorate degree holders we have not sent there? Still, education is a mess. This is policy and policy delivery. It is not about an attack on education. No one attacks education. The argument Brother Sherif is making, frankly, look, it's like you have your company. Something happened, and there is something that shocked the system. And for you to sit down there and say, you know what, let me analyze and study what shocked the system, you begin to make excuses. We, the educated people, need to sit down and analyze ourselves. What is making our people to ask this question? Let's ask ourselves that question. Mm-hmm. What is making people to ask that book we eat? There's a whole lot of examples. It's like you get a mechanic. You say you get a mechanic, every day your car breaks down. Because a mechanic that they want mechanic will eat because the mechanic not fixing the car. This is a simple thing. Mm-hmm. So instead of the educated people sitting down to really understand, first of all, to accept their failure, that we failed our country. We failed to provide a policy description that's supposed to make life better for our society, and how can we re-engage? They sit there in their arrogance that whenever you talk about their failure, you anti-education. How dare you question us we the educated, that we fail. Just continue to give us power and responsibility, and let's continue to fail you. That the message Brother Sherif is preaching. Nothing is preaching here. You know, let's give the educated people a chance. And the advocate, the point here is not to advocate for people who are not educated to be given responsibility. That's not the advocacy. The point is for us to sit down and analyze and develop new minds and new thinking, so that when we get to power again, if the people give us chance to ever have the opportunity to lead, so that we can apply our education effectively to solve the problem of the people, so that question can never again be asked in our country history.
Thank you. Thank you. And Carl, let's differentiate education and educated people. So people are looking at this when they say that Boku will eat. They are saying education through the people that are educated. When I was researching on this topic, someone asked me, say, well, is the book people that they are talking to, right? Because they say, if education is supposed to solve problems, and this is the example they give me, and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is educated, why could she not see that the airport requires solar panels? So now Ellen, with her education, did not give us solar panels, give us generators, and they are failing. So educated people are not able to see and solve the problem we want them to solve. And secondly, educated people, we give them power and they are corrupt. So their education is not benefiting us. And so we see education through the people that are educated, and we think they are failures, that both will eat.
I think it's, first of all, presidents are not supposed to choose power sources for airports. That's not their job. When you have a human capacity, human capital deficit, it doesn't matter how brilliant your plan is. If you design the most beautiful mansion or skyscraper ever known to man, and the only building materials that you have are sticks and mud, you're going to have sticks and mud. Even if once in a while you'll have, a steel beam or a diamond, the majority of your building material is stick and mud. And this stick and mud is what we call miseducation, or the pretense of education, the mimicry of education, the posturing of education, but the lack of depth and the lack of practical application that is necessary to function. No human being, as far as I know, alive, is capable of running an entire country alone. Former President Sirleaf is absolutely educated. She is a brilliant economist. She's not an airport manager. She just isn't. And when you call upon Liberians who have credentials to come in and manage things, manage the energy sector, manage the ports, manage public works, you're expecting that someone who comes in with all of these credentials is going to be able to either do it or find the people who know how to do what needs to get done. You're expecting that when elected officials get into office, they're going to understand their power of checks and balances. You're to call people in for questioning, have investigations, find out why is the country running on fuel? Is someone benefiting from fossil fuel energy in Liberia? Is this a syndicate? And is this the true reason behind why Liberia doesn't have electricity? It's glaring, really, if you look at it from a policy perspective. It has to be, because even compensation was done in fuel slips. So there's other reasons behind why the country doesn't have electricity. But again, competence, people who are in certain positions would see the red flags and do an open investigation. To this day, no one's questioning any of it. But, for certain people who are accustomed to seeing things in a holistic way, there's a glaring red flag there when it comes to the power crisis in Liberia. It seems to be deliberate. So anyway, well, I digress. So the point I'm making here is people like to say these things. And anytime, Dennis, someone tells you, oh, this person was educated, but they were not able to solve world peace. I mean, tell them to say, look, countries are run by many educated people, technocrats, really. Politicians are not necessarily technocrats. And that's one of the biggest failures of Liberia, is that the politicians get in there and they think they know everything. We should understand that he's not a technocrat. He's a charismatic guy. He's a superstar, a global superstar. He should know his limitations and bring technocrats in to solve problems. He shouldn't stand up and say, I declare this place by Spriggs Airport to be, a shrine dedicated to me under the auspice of a park called, Invincible Park. I mean, the arrogance. And then technocrats say, hey, sir, you shouldn't build a park right next to this airport. Their planes don't even go to the park. I mean, this is absurd. It is part of the problem that we're experiencing. You've got people who are supposed to contain and direct and instruct even the president that are not doing so. And that's unfortunate. This issue of mimicry, and you listen to our finance minister, he's a master mimic. He knows all of the jargon. He can, he knows, like, it's like he watches actual educated people. He watches actual intellectuals, and then he postures himself like them, and he tries to speak like them and carry himself like them. But it's incoherent. It doesn't make any sense because it's mimicry. And he may be able to impress people who don't know better, but he can't, people who do know better can see right through it, that it's just a farce. And this is the problem. I mean, you've had people on the show who have said, that they're legal experts. They come on here and they talk and they make no sense, Dennis. Let's be honest. We've had people come on the show that have been in the legislature, and they don't truly understand, after serving in the legislature, what the function of the legislature is. And they also are supposed to be educated. And Dennis, honestly, they make no sense. You've got people running for president who have had powerful positions in corporate settings, in government settings, and they have failed to study Liberia that they want to be president of. And they don't understand why the country is in the situation it's in. When the reason Liberia is in the situation it's in is no mystery. It's documented in books. Everything that's happened to us has been well documented. It's not a mystery. Even the miseducation, the structure of our education system and why it's so terrible has been well documented. We allowed missionaries, only, missionaries and Peace Corps people, to structure our education system. And you expect missionaries and Peace Corps people to develop good Liberian citizens? Missionaries and Peace Corps people, that's not their job to make Liberian citizens better. They make good Christians or produce, good, obedient, people who love America and will later participate in the greatest brain drain in human history per capita.
Scott, before you end that, 30 seconds. If you give the example that there are people running for president, there are legal experts that they don't make sense, there are people running for president, they don't study. What's your point there? What are you trying to get at?
I'm saying that the ineptitude that has come with poorly educated people posturing and mimicking people who actually know things, and they're causing more harm than good to the society. This is a fact.
Is that what making the people to ask that book will eat? Is that the point?
I don't, I don't really know why anyone would say that, because just because someone or there's a new wave of pseudo intellectuals that popped up doesn't mean that education itself is bad.
The expectation from that educated person, the expectations have not been met, their needs have not been fulfilled based on the education this person got. That's was their hope. I
think the problem is, again, that statement comes from a position of ignorance. Wouldn't you agree? If you're saying that book will eat, it means you yourself are unfamiliar with books. So I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole, because if you're familiar with books, you wouldn't be anti-books. So I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. And I don't want to speak poorly of people who don't deserve my tongue lashing right now. So I don't know why they say it or what motivates it. I've never thought in negative terms about books my entire life. So I cannot relate to that sentiment. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to analyze it either because I don't understand it.
Right. And that's very fair. Mr. Sirleaf,
Dennis,
I know you have something to say, but let me add to that. The politics of all this, right? We cannot deny that politicians use this for benefits. Like I gave you an example of Mr. Weah saying, what have your book people done? So politicians use this. They capitalize on it.
well,
But it's also fair to say people actually have expectations, and if they are not getting those benefits from the educated people, they get frustrated and say that book will eat.
yes, Dennis. So there's a Marxist theory of education, the conflict theory that talks about how middle class people are educated in public school. They're programmed to obey, to show up on time, because then they will go to the factory and obey the corporate leaders and whoever's the head of the production line. They show up on time, they follow rules, they conform. And so that's why education empowers, education also oppresses. That's why I said we're not here to really discuss education and education theory. We're here to try to talk about why, well, people ask that book will eat. Let me tell you, to the contrary, I said earlier, the irony is Liberia is a very credential society. Everybody in Liberia, whether they're poorly educated or the mimicking or the pseudo educated, they want some kind of credential, they want some kind of title. That's why people are doctor. People will fight their way, even if they bribe their way into a higher institution to acquire some kind of credential. They're not competent. Look, I was in Liberia between 2012 and 2018 working for a major international donor government in a very mid-managerial position for 6 years, working directly with the government of Liberia and other diplomatic missions and other donors. I saw this, and I volunteered taught at the University of Liberia for 6 years at a graduate school. Some of my students, with all due respect to them, and we talk about this a lot of times, will come to class. They're not even qualified really to be a very good undergraduate student it's not a fault of their own altogether. Again, the war years, what happened, the education system, and qualified teachers and people have left the country or died or something happened. So the system is coming back. But my point is, Liberia is a very credential society. Everybody is a doctor, is a counselor, is a something. Whether they qualify for that degree, they'll go to diploma mills, they'll buy degrees or buy title to come to be called a certain way, because then that's what society looks up to. If you have title, then you're an elite and you're held in a certain social position. Okay, so of course politicians use that, because then they look at the poorly educated or the uneducated youth and then make them to be praise singers behind them, put berets on their heads. They're not after fostering their education, advancing their education to sophisticate these young people, to make them competent people, because then these youth who become competent, who apply themselves, they're competitive. They're viewed as competitive, and therefore they're not desirable to the politicians' needs. The Cole's point about competence. So let's make no mistake, education is not the same as competence. Competence is really what we lack in Liberia a lot of times. And nowadays, people have credentials, as I said, but they cannot produce. They're not fully developed professionals that can go to a workplace and do their work to diligently produce professional. This is not a denigration or talk down on Liberia. By all means, the very highly competent professional Liberians in Liberia who have never left Liberia. But let's face it, that is kind of what we're dealing with on our hands when it comes to the education sector. So, of course, politicians will use young people, people who are not even so youth anymore. They call them youth. They will do that bidding for them, because they have to go to them to beg them for things, so wait for handouts and so on. So these politicians have no incentive, again, to really develop competent people, no incentive to help build education system in such a way that these young people can benefit from. So it's a combination of all kinds of things that we're seeing here. I agree that a lot of mimicry is happening. In public policy, there's a thing called isomorphic mimicry, where two things look exactly the same, right? Something that's the real deal, and another thing that mimics that thing. And when you see it looks exactly like you see police officers, you go every country, somebody's wearing uniform, carrying a gun, they look like a police, they are police, right? Well, does this particular individual in my country perform the job of an actual trained police officer? You can replicate that across various sectors, across systems. So yes, mimicry is happening in the education sector, in other sectors in the country. That is just why it is. So this whole idea that the denigrate education, and yet on the other hand, the very credentialed society, everybody wants title, everybody wants education, market women sending their kids to school as a way out of poverty. I can't balance it really. I mean,
Right.
I can only say that it's system failure, it's educated people's failure. Therefore, people then come from a place of frustration and ask that question that book will eat.
Mr. Sherif, maybe you can balance it, right? That people that say these things, they are the one that are buying degrees. I mean, there's a lot of, and there's one guy who really make a career out of critiquing people with fake degrees, right? So there's a lot of honorary degrees these days. Everybody is a doctor. Even in our churches, you don't see pastors now. And to Sirleaf point, you see archbishop, you see apostle, you see bishop. Everybody wants this big title. We also see in the educate, everybody is doctor, whether it is earned, it is doctorate, or is bought. We also see this. I mean, every year the university is putting out thousands of graduates. So if people, according to you, if people are vilifying education, denigrating literacy, why is this rush to feign being educated or to mimic, using your word, Mr. Sirleaf, to mimic education? And how you call that? Isomorphic mimicry.
Oh yeah, isomorphism, it comes from the physical science. Yeah,
Yeah.
like two green snake look exactly the same. One of them is venom, a venomous person. The other one's harmless, but they can look exactly the same.
So Mr. Sherif, how do speak to this idea that the same people that are saying book has not done anything for us, the same people, under the cover of darkness, buying degrees?
Yeah, so that's the conundrum, right? I mean, and it's hypocrisy at its best. So, but let me address something Mr. Kunney said earlier. He said nobody has ever attacked education. Nobody is attacking education. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because, maybe you weren't paying attention in 1984 when there was this assault, invasion of the campus of the University of Liberia. Maybe you weren't paying attention in 1988 when Mr. Doe banned student politics because allegedly C.H. Dewar High School in Tupmanburg, Bumming County, was burned down. So Mr. Doe used that as a pretext to ban student politics all across the Liberian nation state. When the military came into office, what happened? Student politics was banned, later lifted after the election of 1986. And then there was a pretext.
Sherif, does that presuppose that there was student politics before the coup?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if you read Twan Ware's Love of Liberty, you will see that there was active student political activities going on even in the Tubman era, up to the Tobo era. Tobo era was even freer. So there was student political activities going on campuses all across Liberia, all across, university campuses. I'm talking Cottington University College, the University of Liberia, and Tubman College in Cape Palmer. So, but fast forward. So the C.H. Dewar incident was used to ban student political activities. And I know that I participated in a protest against the appointment of Stephen Yakerson, and that protest was put down. I also was involved in a protest when student politics was banned on the campus of the University of Liberia after C.H. Dewar High School was burned down. There were police officers and armed men who were around the campus of the university, never entered the campus, but the police officers with rubber bullets enter our campus and tear gas us and shot rubber bullets at us and disperse us. And so that happened. That's an assault on education. Education has been assaulted also during the Civil War. So how dare you say nobody has assaulted education? Professors were killed, school buildings were burnt down. When I went to the campus of the University of Liberia after the Civil War, there were bullet marks all over the campus. That's an assault on education. Libraries were burnt down. Teachers were killed. That's an assault on education. And so now, fast forward to this era, in the George Weah era. So what these guys are doing, Dennis, to directly answer that question, what they're doing now is they are verbally attacking education, but at the same time, so they are very jealous, right? As Ahmed said, so these guys, under the cover of darkness, they're accepting these degrees from certain universities. These are honorary degrees, and they walk around with these honorary degrees.
Yeah.
George Weah is not content with just calling himself doctor. Now the news, the public, the news media has to carry doctor. Everyone that's addressing him has to call him doctor. All the sycophants have to address him as doctor. This is hypocrisy at its best. And this is someone who said, oh, I don't need a degree to know there's trash over here. You know, I don't need a degree. You know, these book people. George Weah has verbally attacked book people. He has launched an all-out assault on book people, and therefore the residual effect of that is his guys in the street. I'm not going to call them, you know, other names that I would like to, but the guys in the street that are parading the street for George Weah are now saying to you, Dennis, when you argue that George Weah is not educated, they're going to retort and say, you know, that book will eat. We don't eat book. He educated, he not educated. We're going to vote for him. That's how hardcore they are. And look no further than Mr. Kunney right here. Mr. Kunney is saying every single day, Mr. Kunney is reminding us that the intelligentsia, the so-called intelligentsia has failed Liberia, and therefore,
absolutely,
George Weah is the Messiah. George Weah is the Messiah that's going to lift us out of our burdens, that's going to lift us out of poverty. This uneducated president is the one that's been touted as someone who's going to lift us out of poverty, out of the abyss of ignorance and disease and everything. So when they launch that attack, so I'm surprised more than anything else that Mr. Kunney, someone who is very well educated, first of all, launches attack on educated people. Second, he is now saying that no one has ever attacked education. And I've just enumerated for you, Dennis, how many times our leaders have attacked our educational institutions. Collectively, they have attacked education. And so that is a fact.
Thank you. Mr. Kunney.
You know, I'm not really going to help the brother with his fascination with George Weah. I think George Weah is embedded in Sherif like Rudy Giuliani and 9/11. You know, they say Giuliani couldn't make two statements without saying 9/11. So Sherif is unable to.
That's overused. Try another one.
Wait, so you're comparing the president to a tragedy?
Hold on, let Mr. Kunney talk.
Sherif cannot complete a simple sentence without calling George Weah's name, and I can't help him. But let me dispel some inaccuracies he's presenting here. We all have our definition of certain things. If we say there is an assault on education, then there must be governmental action to suppress education in our country, discouraging the whole idea of education as a matter of policy. You can't say the dictatorial policy of Samuel Doe repressing student rights, attacking school is an assault on education. I'm sorry, that's not an assault on education. There has not been any Liberian government, even including the two TWP, that has assaulted education in our country, that has adopted a national policy to not educate Liberians. Never in the history of Liberia have we had any administration in Liberia with a national policy, and that's what we call assault on education. So if you want to go on your tangent with Samuel Doe, the dictatorship and other things like that, for me, it does not amount to an assault on education. That's not what people call assault on education. It must be government action. It must be policy driven to ensure that people are not educated. It must be something like the Taliban policy, where there is a national policy to stop women from going to school. Those are the kind of things we're talking about. But because you engage in activities that the government find inimical to its interest, they suppress student political activities, you call that assault on education. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. And to be honest with you, I'm not going to apologize. I'm one of those who feel that the educated people in our country has not delivered for our people. They have not delivered. They have not delivered. And I challenge you again, what national problems have we solved as a country that we will not need to visit for the next 20 years or 10 years, or that we just begin repair? Is it health? Is it health? Is it, no, I'm coming. Is it?
No, I want to give you. There's a question here for you based on what you are saying.
Yeah, let me complete my thought. Then you ask the question.
Thank you.
Is it health? Is it education? The education is a mess. How many doctorate degrees have headed the Ministry of Education? Is it food sufficiency? How many doctorate degrees have headed the Ministry of Agriculture? This is the failure that the ordinary people see that making them to ask that bogu we eat. It's not an assault on education. It's an assault on the failure of the educated people to deliver for our people. If our people were seeing roads, if they were seeing better hospital, if they were seeing better schools, if they were self-sufficient, if they had economic opportunities to advance themselves, they would never ask that question that book will eat. And until the educated class can find themselves to answer that question, to put themselves in a position to deliver for the people will continue to ask that question. It's like the mechanic who repairing your car, the car keep breaking down, and the people say, but what kind of mechanic you got? Yeah, go ahead with the question.
Mr. Kunney, you are mixing politician and education, right? I think there were, and there's a question here from Dave Jack for you, but let me give you an example. Take for instance.
No, one more question, but before you give me an example, how you give me an example before you give me a question?
Mr. Kunney, yeah, that educated people now, they can
intelligence, how you can bully people. You say there is question for me, instead of giving me the question, you want to give me an example.
Yeah, no, I want to give you an example before the question, right?
Okay, so, intelligence, you go ahead.
All right, you win. Kunney is bold-faced wrong. We elect people on political party tickets, not on the basis of education. How does education become the factor when it is not the basis of our choices?
Because when you elect the people on political party ticket, they employ people who are educated to run the government. You hear it says, oh, the president does not run the government. The president employs someone who is minister of education that has that know about education. The president employs somebody in agriculture that know agriculture. It's not how we appoint our people.
No,
when the people fail. Yeah, so if the system fail.
With President Weah, what they are saying is that is not the case. You talk about mimicry.
Oh. Did I answer Dave Jack's question? Asking whether I answer a question.
No, I can't ask you. And the example I was about to give you is we are not, take for instance, the people that will watch Focus on Liberia and the people that will watch a show where somebody is just insulting and doing all that, right? So these things are not on the basis of education. We are not following leaders, or we are not voting for people based on their academic credentials, based on their competence when it comes to being educated or not. So when political leaders fail, it is not that education has failed. I want you to speak to that.
Yeah, but I already told you.
All right.
The sister said, the sister said, and I agree, the president does not run the government in isolation. The president runs the government with a whole lot of people. Many of them that come with, like my brother said, high credentials. People that we have competence in because they went to the school, they got this credential, they got this thing. These are the people that are brought on board to help the president lead. These are the people that fail. These are the people that don't deliver. My brother, let me ask you one question. All the educated people we hire in Liberia, I mean, what they needed to do to tell Bowman company to pave the little road from Bowman to Kakata.
But educated people did not have that decision call. Let me bring you in on this one, then we're going to go to our calls. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus
Who
on
signed a
Liberia.
concessional agreement? Is it educated people that are ordinary?
This is Focus on Liberia. To join the discussion, call 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. Call. This whole idea that Mr. Kunney is pitching now is the failure of the politician, because the politician is employing educated people, and educated people are not being able to deliver. So education has failed. That book will eat is justified. Why are you shaking your head? I thought that's what you said.
No, you didn't call here to discuss the failure of politicians. You called us to ask the question, where does the question that book will eat? Now you're extending it to failure of politicians.
No. You
want to discuss the failure of politicians, we can do that.
No, what I'm saying is you are equating the failure of politicians to the failure of education or educated people.
No, we are asking the question, why did the people ask that question in our country? They asked it
okay, so I'm going to come in.
The people that
one of the things that I saw that I think is just absurd is people thinking that you have to be Boko Haram in order to be anti-education. You don't have to be Boko Haram to be anti-education. You don't have to be the Taliban to be anti-education. You don't have to be some right-wing weird group out in Utah to be anti-education. To be anti-education, you defund education, as has been done since we had took over. The budget for education has decreased, both by smaller budgetary allotment and then also the tuition that used to go, the little bit of tuition that used to go towards, keeping up the institution has also supposedly been waived at some ad hoc way without talking about how it's going to be replenished. Education is extremely expensive everywhere in the world. In Liberia, it's cheap. It's not that it's subsidized, it's that it's non-existent, it's cheap. And that is the assault on education. Setting up a building with poorly trained, poorly supported, low-skilled people, calling them teachers, with a few teachers dotted in there somewhere who are extremely frustrated, and exposing our children to probably the most substandard excuse of public education on the planet, and then saying that this is not an assault on education, I think is just not honest. You don't have to be Boko Haram to assault education. None of us, I wouldn't would want to go through what our children are going through in Liberia. None of us would be where we are today if we had to go to school in, those conditions that many of the children go to school in today. Things have deteriorated. This is a fact. So I don't agree with you, Mr. Kunney, that there's no attack on education. Every year, things are declining and things are getting worse for our children instead of improving. So we talk about the failure of the intelligentsia. If the intelligentsia failed, the unintelligentsia is sending Liberia straight to the abyss of failure. So, to act as though that because some miseducated people who have, not had the skills to do what they've been asked to do, so therefore we'll replace them with people that have absolutely no skills at all. How does that make sense? How is that rational? It doesn't make any sense. This country that we're talking about isn't someone else's country. These are not other people suffering. These are our own relatives, our own blood. This is our home. These are our children that are being subjected to this. These are our children that were marching in the streets for the mayor graduating. I mean, what a freaking, iron-fisted, weird situation to have children pulled out of school to celebrate a grown 30-some-odd-year-old man finally graduating from college, who's been put in the position of a mayor. It was shameful. And none of us ever saw him even, going to school. And that's fine. Maybe he graduated. I don't really care. Why are you pulling people's children out of school to celebrate mediocrity? And then, we sit here and say there's no attack on education. The problem with our thinking sometimes is not that people are competitive. Instead of being competitive and wanting to compete, they would rather drag other people down to their level instead of raising themselves up to the level of others. So we have a culture, we like to use the cliche about crabs in a barrel. Crabs in a barrel are not ambitious. They only want to see you down in the bottom of the barrel where they are. They're not trying to climb on your back to get to a higher place. No, they only want to drag you down to where they are. And therefore, when they think that you've sufficiently gotten there, they go and get some rubber stamp, fake, mimic credential so that they can pretend to have accomplished something. This is sick. And this is what's happening. And our children are watching. Our children are watching this. You can have a degree without ever reading a book. You can have a title without ever studying anything. And because you have this title and you've never studied anything, you're going to be put in charge of things. How is this progress? Even if I were to agree with you, which I don't, that there's been nothing good that has happened in Liberia in 175 years. I don't agree with that. But even if I were to, let's just assume that repeated false narrative is true. How is what we're doing now an improvement upon that? It's not. It's degeneration. What we have now is a degenerate society. If you think the last 175 years was low and base and it was a failure, imagine being a degenerate of that. That's where we are today. And that's unfortunate. So yes, please have your fill of books. Get books. Get them online digitally. Get books and eat them. There's information in those books that can save your life. There's information in those books that will develop your mind and help you solve problems for yourself. And you don't have to rely on the guy that's giving you rights to do it for you.
Can I come in?
I can hear you, Dennis.
Dennis, we can't hear you.
I got a few comments here. We want to read those comments and then we can go to our call lines. Sam Wallow, this statement is also meaning that Bogu will eat. A slap at those seeking to bring effective change to a cynical society. Each time a potential leader proposes an effective solution to a problem, they are ridiculed with the statement that so and so we will eat. And he continues, the technocrats were there for 12 years. What was the difference in the outcome for the everyday people? And that is playing into Mr. Kunney's narrative. Mr. Kunney, I see you smiling there. Mr. Kunney, you are now one of the educated people. You sound like a long-time buddy, Gus Jala, always finger-pointing while sitting in the U.S. enjoying. Go home and help the government you support. Jimmy Eastman, Carl is pointing out something very important in this conversation. Many of these so-called educated people are only posturing but actually lack know-how. They can't create, build, or develop anything. Regurgitating what someone else's idea is not education. Walking around with doctorate degree for sure. Ask them what they can actually do. Nothing except boast they have degree. Emmanuel Sengbe has a long one here. The easiest way to kill a nation is to elect as its president an uneducated man such as George Weah, who has become one of the reasons why some people do not like democracy. A large portion of illiterate youth thoughtlessly elected an uneducated man, believing that he will understand their plight. They were wrong. Those who support Weah are either his tribesmen or Liberians who profoundly illiterate. I cannot disagree with that more because to have 50 plus 1, it can't be youth alone or your tribesmen alone. Francis C. Wilson, it is abject laziness and entitlement. The sense that you can become something or somebody just by dressing the part. To actually sit in a classroom and put in the work is too much work. Our YouTube Fly JC say, yes, we can eat books if you understand the information in the book. I told an UL agriculture graduate to grow her own cabbage. She had no idea where to start. Read the info in the book, and definitely you will agree with Carl that we should eat book. Jackie said, where was the outrage from the parents? Jackie, I don't know what, maybe I'm reading those educated people are being hunted and targeted to the point of silence with the strategy of scare tactics by making the country scary. So the diaspora Liberians are intimidated and hesitant to come home and frightening the masses on the ground to get low voting turnout. Mr. Kunney, I'll let you respond to someone, and you were about to say something, and then we can go to our callers.
Look, the point is, again, people do not get the purpose of education, and really is their right to education, better our society. Education create the kind of citizenry which you have. So if the nation failed to educate its citizens, you don't blame the citizens for acting in a way because of your failure to educate them. I keep asking, what national problem have we solved as a nation that maybe we need not go to for the next 10 years or for the next 20 years? What have we solved? Everything in our country is a problem. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. So for those who feel that our educated people have delivered marvelously in our country, this is the question they should answer. And we can't cure our people. We don't have doctors. We don't have hospitals. You're talking about when I talk about how long we're going to take people to build road from bunk mines, you say not a politician or the educated people. But then who signed the concession agreement? Is that the ordinary people that sign concession agreement for our people?
Politicians.
That educated people that sign these concession agreements. Okay. And the question is, how are they using their education for these agreements for the exploitation of our natural resources?
Thank you, Mr. Sirleaf, or 1 minute so we can go to our callers.
Oh man.
Thank you.
He wanted to come into your time now enough again, Mr. Kunney?
I mean, you're the moderator. If you think it's enough, it's enough. But you don't have to be. I mean, there is nothing that supports the fact that this government has assaulted education. In fact, the government has given the most generous support to education, free education to public universities. The budget of education in Liberia is higher than what it can be. The statistics are there.
Thank you.
I don't see the assault on education.
Mr. Sirleaf, 30 seconds. So
I want to say something about this idea that a president does not have, to solve the problem at the airport or be the one to do agriculture. I agree. However, I think on this program, on another program on this platform, I talk about this. Somebody in public policy described a president as a symphony orchestra conductor, one who knows the music, one who is conducting musicians with different instruments to produce a harmonious sound at the end of the day. The different notes and different instruments and musicians with sort of different genre. By the end of the day, they're producing the sound that the audience, the people, the Liberian citizens receive and enjoy, and it's the services that the government provides. So the point of that analogy is the president doesn't have to have all the expertise and competence in every area. However, the conductor has to know the music so that the conductor can pick which musician or which instrument, who sits in what position, so that the conductor can surround themselves with the right instruments and musicians so they produce that sound. If you don't have a president who you make the argument for doesn't have to know all the notes and know music to conduct, then there's a problem there. Another point, President Weirdo is listed as one of the highly educated presidents in Africa. He himself, I saw a YouTube clip where he talked about how when he tried to run for president in 2005, they say he didn't know book, he didn't have degree. He went back, he came to America. He said, I went to the same high school my daughter was in. I got my high school diploma. Then I went to college. Then I went and got my master's degree. So they say you didn't have education. I went and got an education. So that's the same irony I'm still talking about, right? People say, well, that book will eat. Yet we're a very credential society. People require the credential in order to elevate you in a position of power.
Thank you. Let's bring in our callers here now. The first one here is Jimmy Eastman calling from the nation's capital. Jimmy, what you got? Jimmy, are you there? All right, let's go to the.
You can hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you. I was about to move on. Go ahead.
This topic really touched my heart because it's something that we've been fooled by. We are confounding education and know-how. Those two are synonymously used, but they're not synonyms. Know-how refers to skills, while education refers to knowledge, some kind of knowledge. For knowledge, you can read and writing, you can get, when you're familiar with some information, you have knowledge. But skill refers to the ability to apply knowledge to specific situations, okay? Skills, you have to practice it. You can let's take a sport. You can know all about the sports, all the names of the teams, all the players, all the statistics, but you don't know how to play. To be good at a sport, you have to actually practice it. We have people walking around, they say they have knowledge because they got a degree, but they don't have skills of doing the job. That is where our problem is. We got people who don't know the job. They've never done it. They walk around with a piece of paper and they say, I'm a bookman. Yes, those are the kind of bookmen you don't want. But you want people with skills who know how to do the job. In this country, before they give you a job, they don't care if you get a PhD from Harvard. They ask you, what have you been doing in the last couple of years of your life? And if you have not been doing something that is applicable for what they want to hire you for, they're not going to hire you. So we got to stop this walking around with book and look for people who got skills.
Thank you, Jimmy. Let's bring on Elvis. Elvis, you're live.
Thank you so much, Mr. John. Thanks to the panelists tonight. I guess some things I want to say, I won't say it because it might be antithetical to this discussion. But I'm kind of left, a bit discouraged, to say the least. Because the reality, like Mr. Eastman just said, where now do we find our people from to do to become technocrats in Liberia? Because if we hold people to the same standard as people in the United States or employers in the United States will hold people, to their standard, do we have enough people to fold the entire Ministry of Education to run that ministry effectively? Or do we have to recruit all of our technocrats from the United States because this is right? Do we got to go abroad to bring in technocrats? What does Ms. Call think about a person who graduated from the University of Liberia today and has a master's degree in education? How much weight does that master's degree hold in her mind? Is that person qualified to go and serve as a deputy minister of education, or even if they had a PhD from a university in Liberia, does that equate to somebody being a good technocrat in Liberia? And let me just kind of go back to what I wanted to say.
And what do you think about that question?
You asking me or you asking her?
No, I'm asking you. What do you think before?
No, I think the reality is, we just can't look at Liberia in the prism of, the United States, because many of us here, we understand what these things are and what it takes to be a true professional. But in Liberia, it's completely different, and it's the sad reality of our country. We can't equate, accounting in America to accounting in Liberia. Is that those skill sets would be completely different.
Yeah,
we can't look at it because look at Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. She compared to George Weah, she have a farther reach to recruit technocrats. She brought people like Ms. Call. She brought a lot of other people from around, the United States who have vast knowledge in different sectors. And they came in there and they did a pretty good job. But the reality is George Weah is limited on that front because he himself was not a professional in terms of being an accountant or a banker who have all this, contacts in different places that he can go in and recruit these different people. So our country is what it is. I mean, people who are there right now with the education that they have, those are the people who are going to serve us. We can't make new, people and give them new degrees from Western world with new experiences. The people who are there are the people that are going to serve us.
Thank you.
So thank you again. Hopefully she can answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, mark that down, please. Let me go to Oliver.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for good to see again, good to hear the ideas and business on.
Speak a little louder, please.
Hello?
Speak a little louder.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. Thank all the brothers and sisters, the contributions. Mr. Wilmot, Mr. Mohamed, speaking so hard. I don't know I don't think Cole, I don't know how it's going to happen because today has been but however, you guys are talking about it. They want to do it now and brainstorm on something. Just to see where I see, well, I mean, to be 2 months ago when Cole said the same thing. 85% of Liberian hard-working people are off the country. And because of that problem, it's a problem. The second thing is that the other person is saying that it's not educated person, and then Cole said the same thing. There was a problem with Mr. Soil, and nobody could find out particular things. And one doctor that was in Liberia phone that I was Cole said, I can remember, I called her, and she know that. So, first of all, I think that we need to know what is education, where the genesis of education from? Is it because of the classroom that we get education from? And where do we have education from?
Thank you.
Or maybe we need to put the thing where Uncle Bo and great-grandfather Uncle Bo will go see what he said. And where's the bucket? Where's the bucket? Let everyone else find a bucket in where you are. That quote in the great speech in 95.
Thank you.
Because where's your bucket? Where's the bucket? And if you want a drink, bring a bucket and put the water there. We have a bucket in the thing what you were saying. It's not about all having a big degree that what other brothers and sisters saying here. But rather, we want to have this kind of private course. And what the brother was saying, the mechanics is about which we have the great mechanics, the great many people, and also agriculture.
Thank you, Oliver.
Hello?
Yeah, thank you. You can conclude now because we have so many callers here.
Okay, let me conclude. Okay. If you look at the whole thing again, the whole thing is derived of agriculture. Our whole world is derived from agriculture. And some of the great players, because whenever the go to the farm, we're working out. Working like getting thinking, we're working out. So why is it that when people talk about us feeding ourselves and we get so angry because we depend on other people to feed us?
Thank you.
So maybe we can do the same thing where the other people do. It's better that way. Like I was saying the last time, let us go and make Liberia the way we want Liberia to be. And we complain every day.
Thank you. Aliyu Kamara.
Yes, sir. First of all, let me just say, I really feel dismayed when I hear people lower the bar, lower the standard so bad for this Liberia. It makes me sick when somebody comes out and say an accountant in Liberia cannot be equated to an accountant in the United States. We saw people go to Liberia, graduate from the University of Liberia, end up becoming professors in the United States of America. That's an insult to the intelligence of the Liberian people. People should not be saying that. And for anyone to say that George Weah does not have the ability to find actual professionals, again, that's just dishonesty to the core. When CDC was established, it was established by all professionals. When George Weah won election, what did he do? He got rid of the professionals and he brought the ignoramus around of his level. And that is how he feels confident. All right? He has low self-esteem. So when people make these kinds of statements, it gets under my skin. But here's something here, my friend. Cole is over there actually not just laying premises, but she's pinpointing the problem in a way that anybody will understand it. And then when I hear my uncle push this one old CDC line, what did they do in the 12 years? Again, that's another thing that can really piss me off. You had a government, and I don't like to speak for the Unity Party. They had their own blunders. But you had a government that predicted the condition for you to just start from and go ahead. Instead of you focusing or building upon what you have, you sit there all day, you destroy what you met, at the same time expecting those that were there before you to take the blame for the nonsense that you are creating. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, conclude, please.
Yes, there was no educational program really in place other than what the UN and other NGOs were putting in place, because we had a government that was, we did not have a government. We had all these LNTGs and all of these interim administrations. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf met a complete dilapidated system. She set up all your little corruption, anti-corruption entity. She gave your terminal. You're not able to run the terminal. You're saying she stole money. But you know what terminal she gave terminal? Why you can't build upon what you have? Thank you, man.
Thank you, Ali. I know your blood really boiling now, but thank you.
Yeah.
Let me get the last call up. The number is from Wilmington, Delaware. Your name and where you calling from?
Yes, I'm Jefferson G. I'm really constrained to talk, even though I have a good follow-up of this program.
Yeah, Jeff.
But to just add on what the last caller said, I'm greatly disappointed in Mr. Kunney. You know, maybe he doesn't understand the difference between the importance of education and the other policy implementation or failure. Now, he said, and he contradicted himself, there are traditional education and formal education. But everyone wants to be educated and cannot be overemphasized the importance of education, because there is no government in modern days that can operate in space, even if it's traditional or non-traditional. So to come out and start to disabuse the minds of young people who are craving to be educated, and he always comes on the program and just defend failures, flaws, and nothing else to just promote CDC. CDC, you lost CDC, but look at the reality, look at the failure, look at the policy implementation, look at the loopholes, and how best can the government make those promises. What is a change of hope? What is a country giant? What are those things? For 3 conservative elections, you won the third one, and yet you still pushing propaganda that is faulty.
So Jefferson.
Because of the failures of our government.
Jefferson.
It's not about what people have done. You are in position, yes.
The book will eat. What you say about that? Forget about Mr. Kunney. He got his position.
Yes. I think many times when people are frustrated, they're going to say things that will appease them. Take, for example, when Madam Sirleaf said the education system was a mess, I was one of those persons who went on radio station and disagreed with strongly, because 85% of the people who worked in the government at the time were all local people who were educated locally, and when abroad got a master, and some people got a master right in Liberia, and they performed well. So people are frustrated, they're going to say things. And both will eat, because sometimes we come and cajole those electors. We give promises that we at least cannot fulfill. So it gets them so agitated and say, get away with all the big nonsense bogus sticking. But notwithstanding, education remains paramount to everything we do.
Thank you. Thank you. That was the last caller. So let's go around the room and respond to our callers. Time is fast spent. Sorry. Let me start with Mr. Sherif. Let's do 1 minute each to respond to our callers. Mr. Sherif, let me start with you.
Yeah. So what you usually have with the callers is, again, like, it's like the panel. Like, you have people with different views. You have Aliyu, who is basically, not on the same side as, Mr. Kunney. And you have other, some others who may support Mr. Kunney's point of view. But the bottom line is, it is clear. It is very, very clear that what Mr. Kunney stated, that, I hope you'll come back and realize that it was wrong that he said there's never been any assault on education in Liberia. There has been, and there continues to be situations where the educational system is neglected in Liberia for example, over salaries, right? So these guys are paying themselves. The upkeep of the government is even more than what they spent for education. So before Mr. Weir, there was, I laid down, I enumerated a whole host of events that occur, which were real assault on education. And so now, with George Weir's administration, even if he has not invaded, sent armed men to the campus of the University of Liberia, his policy is averse to quality education. And meanwhile, he himself has sought for himself, as Ahmed said, some level of education. Now, I don't know why whereas education has not manifested in real, what should I say, in real ways that we can see that he's an educated person, he's making educated decisions. So education is supposed to be a way for us to make good decisions. I don't think he has made good decisions with the personnel around him. I don't think he has. All you need to do, you look at the city mayor of Monrovia. That's an appointed position. That is something he needs to look at right now. He needs to look at his finance minister. He needs to look at those critical areas where his government can be efficient. He needs to look at education. He needs to look at poverty. He needs to look at all of these different things to be able to run an efficient administration. Unfortunately, he's not doing that.
Thank you. And let's again continue with 1 minute each to respond to our callers. Let me go to Carl.
So you're going to have to refresh my memory about the specific question that was asked. It has something to do with human capital flight, something like that.
Okay, let me give you questions that a lot of them.
Well, I think he was asking about brain drain, and
right. He said if you compare the people in right now, do you think the graduates from UL, from the University of Liberia, can they really perform?
So I have this. If you depend on the University of Liberia to educate you, and you don't take initiative and go beyond that, you're going to have a lot of problems. When I was in Liberia, people are naturally gifted and extremely intelligent. They are in a situation where they have substandard educations because they lack the resources to be able to properly provide the information that they need to have a modern education. This is just a fact. You've got doctors graduating that haven't been in a real laboratory before, and they're doctors. You've got nurses graduating that don't have proper training because of lack of resources. To obtain an education in a situation where education is so dismally underfunded puts you at a disadvantage. I think that's what he means. That does not mean that people back home are not intelligent. Of course, people back home are extremely intelligent. In fact, if everyone in Liberia had the educational opportunity that I had, Liberia would look better than Switzerland. It is not that I'm smart. It is that I've had opportunities. And that's what people need in Liberia. They need opportunities. In Africa in general, people need to be able to have access to world-class educations so that they can improve themselves, and by default, the society improves when human capital improves.
Thank you.
The other thing that we need to understand, what happened in Liberia during the civil crisis up to today is akin to what occurred during the transatlantic slave trade. Massive human capital shift. The best, the brightest, the young, the talented, the gifted, huge percentages of that population have been taken out of Liberia and transferred not only to the United States, but Europe, Asia, other African countries. And Liberia is left with a fraction of the talent that it needs to progress. That's the bigger issue. So while in some ways it's a blessing because those people who have been sucked out of the country have had access to better funded educations, more resources to better themselves, they're not going home. Yeah. And the reason, even people like myself who went back to serve, and I've never worked as hard in my entire life as I did when I was in Liberia. Anyone who worked with me would tell you I used to stay at the office. Everywhere I worked, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, I was still working because the responsibility The amount of work, the micromanagement is overwhelming. You have to literally micromanage down to the lowest denominator. That aside, you know, so if you don't have an honest effort like they did in Rwanda and Sierra Leone and other countries that had conflict to draw people back. Rwanda gave people land grants. Come back, we're going to give you land. Come back, we're going to give you this. Those things don't work in Liberia because people have this deep-seated envy and hatred. That old crab in the barrel mentality. Oh, they're coming to come sit on top of our heads. Oh, they're coming to come do this. American people coming. You know, so we don't see the kinship. We don't have the love for each other, even in people's own biological families. They resent their own sister or brother for having an opportunity that they didn't have. And that's some of the problem, you know, reason we're in these problems. So when people say that you can't compare an accountant in Liberia to an accountant in the United States, what they're saying is the school system in Liberia is not comparable to the school system in the United States. And so the outcome of the education is not going to be comparable. It doesn't mean that the person who's attending school in Liberia is not as smart. They could be a genius, but the tools that are available to them are the problem. Liberia is building big concrete dwellings, calling them schools, and there's nothing inside. Absolutely nothing inside that you know resembles a university. And they think schools are brick and mortar buildings. I mean, you can have gifted instructors teach you under one sycamore tree, and you will learn more than someone sitting in a fancy building and having no resources to support their education.
Did you say sycamore tree?
Yeah, you can. I mean, people in this country before public education were educated in one-room churches that they turned into schoolhouses during the week, or literally under trees. I mean, some of the most brilliant slaves were taught and educated under trees. And, you know, not slaves, Africans in America were taught and educated under trees after emancipation and in churches. So education is not about the structure of the building. It's about the content and the skill of that person who's imparting the education, imparting the education upon the student. So we have a lot of things to work on. So I don't want people to say, well, when they say, oh, the accountant is not comparable, they're talking about many layers of issues.
Thank you. And my dream is to go back to Liberia and transform those attire shop into actual learning centers where we'll share ideas instead of just blabbing. Mr. Sherif, I want Mr. Kunney to be live because I can see he got a lot to chew on. Mr. Sirleaf, respond to 1 minute, and people have not been using the 1 minute really to respond to the callers.
Yeah, I'll make 2 points. The sort of common thread to what I heard the callers. Particularly the last caller made a very important point, and I think we hit some of that toward the end there. There are Liberians in Liberia who never left Liberia during the war, who were educated entirely in Liberia, who have applied themselves. So they've gone through the educational system that doesn't serve them well, co-described so adequately. But yet they found resources, they apply themselves, they look for mentors, and they're very competent people. Some of them I worked with over the years. I was working there, very highly qualified professional. Some had the opportunity later to leave the country. So I just wanted to acknowledge that when we talk about the challenges in Liberia and the education system that we experience teaching there and working there, amongst all of that, there are people who are very, very highly competent. On the other hand, there were Liberians who were recruited from the diaspora, who had credentials, who performed very poorly, and were paid more, and which created tension and animosity amongst those who were there and those who came from the diaspora. So it's really an issue of identifying that competence that Jim Collins, the management theorist, talks about, where he compares an institution from good to great, compares an institution, country, or whatever organization to a bus, where you have to devise a mechanism whereby you identify who are the undesirable passengers and get them off that bus, and identify the competent, desirable passengers and put them on the bus. When you do that, it's not enough. You also have to then figure out what are the premium seats who sits in the premium seat, and then you apportion people based on their competence, skills, and qualification. And the driver, of course, again, is the symphony orchestra conductor. It could be the president, it could be the minister. You have to be able to surround yourself with highly qualified, competent people who then can help you drive that bus to its destination. And so, you know, we all mean well for Liberia. We come on these shows. We want to advocate for our country. We want to be able to speak to policymakers and political leaders who are in power and young people who are aspiring to really open their eyes. Liberians in the diaspora, Liberians at home, we have to forge this kingship. We have to collaborate, find a way to really recruit our people and build our country, work together. Because we are the only ones who can do it. We can criticize all we want, and it is bad. The system is inadequate. You know, like Carl said, you have nice buildings. The Chinese built Fahnbulleh campus. But if you don't have qualified professors, competent people, laboratories, you know, libraries, and really educated people, books, you have a problem. You cannot produce a highly competent industrial labor force, and therefore your country cannot compete. So not that we're saying nothing has ever happened in Liberia. A lot of good things have happened in Liberia. But again, pick that bus, you know, identify your passengers, build on what's there, and make progress. We want progress. We're not saying we're denigrating this country and degrading all the people who are there who are not in America. What we're saying is really, let's open up our minds. Fundamentally, there are issues that are wrong with our country and the way we're running our country that are basically rendering us to a point where we're not making the progress we should be making.
Thank you. Mr. Kunney.
You know, sometimes when we talk about Liberia, we tend to speak about Liberia like Moses leading the children of Israel from Egypt to the promised land, where manna fell from heaven. You know, the children of Israel didn't have to do anything. The manna was falling. You know, they got fed from manna that was falling from heaven. All of the colors, all of the statements, the points we've all made here is that we have serious challenges in our country. Everything we spoke to here is either our lack of ability or our inability to put into place system. What promotes incompetency? What promotes mediocrity? What promotes productivity? What promotes all of these things? What promotes backwardness? We've not been able to put into place, you know, systems and other things that will better the lives of our people. That responsibility falls on the shoulders of those who are educated, either as political leaders or as technocrats that have led our country. I came on this show not to spew partisan garbage, but to answer the question, why our people ask that bogu we eat. And clearly it is the frustration. Our people have not seen systems producing results. Our people have not seen productivity from our educated class who are either business managers or who are government managers. We've not seen that productivity. Their problems have not been solved. People are still dying of diseases that could be cured. We still, as a country, cannot feed ourselves. We still, as a country, facing challenges with electricity in the country. We're still facing challenges with road network. So these are the problems that the people see. The economy is not growing. People don't have the opportunities to grow in the country. These are the frustrations that make people to ask that question. And anybody can put a partisan spin on it. You know, you can say it starts with George Weah or it is George Weah creation. Or you can say it started years back. But I still maintain my system, my statement. There has not been an assault on education. And my definition of assault is a government policy that suppresses the right of the people to acquire education. I'm not talking about failure of government to support the educational system with what it needs. Every government got those challenges. But I don't know of any official government policy, either during the period of the TWP or now, where there was this policy that, you know what, Liberians should not be educated. So we have to be clear in mind when we're speaking. Why our people say that book will eat? Because the book is not solving the table issues of the people.
Thank you.
Book is not making the people healthy. Book is not making the people to travel freely from one area of the country to the other. To travel from one area of the country, you got to pass through 30, 40 checkpoints. These are the conditions our people live through from year to year. I'm 60 years old. I know those problems existed and they exist now. Others are free to say that only in a period they exist. And the educated class, including me, we should continue our arrogance that even in our failure, our people cannot question us. It's like that doctor who is a doctor that killing people, but we not even have my people, but what kind of doctor we get here? Let's continue that arrogance. That arrogance will not solve the problem of the Liberian people. But I think if we really self-critique ourselves and develop a different mindset and a different culture to use our education to solve problems, to develop policies and to implement policies that will alleviate the suffering of our people, I can guarantee you that question will not be asked again.
Thank you, Mr. Kunney. We'll now go to your Tabata of the week. But before we get to the Tabata of the week, think about your Tabata. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
Welcome back to Focus on Liberia. This is Tough Talking Thursday, and on every Tough Talking Thursday, we discuss or we talk about the Tabata of the week from our various perspectives. I want our viewers to also weigh in on the Tabata of the week. This time, Mr. Sirleaf is first time on Tough Talking Thursday, so he will come second. Let me start with Mr. Sherif. Your Tabata of the week.
So there was a recent arrest of a Liberian businessman here in the States. So this guy has a diplomatic passport, and the government said that they don't know, somehow they're denying, everything, every connection with him. So the question is, how did he get the passport? And now the government said that, according to the announcement, that they have frozen his assets. So when did you know all of this? So just because the United States government acted, so now they're acting also to freeze his asset. What asset are you talking about? What does he have down there? So this to me is just a big tabata.
Mr. Sirleaf.
Oh, now I see what a Tabata is.
Tabata means nonsense, foolishness, complete rubbish.
Well, I think it was this week that the former Vice President Barker was scheduled to testify on an ongoing case involving ANC political leader Alexander Cummings. I believe that the testimony of Mr. Barker didn't happen. It was aborted. My understanding from media reports is that because there was too much chaos outside the courtroom, supporters of the both political parties who were on the grounds of the courthouse, the Chamber of Justice, they were too rowdy. As a result, the judge basically prevented the testimony and didn't allow the trial to proceed as was scheduled, and because people were rowdy outside the courthouse. Now, I don't know if these people were actually in the courtroom or they were a threat, posing some sort of security threat, if they were just citizens who were outside exercising their constitutional right, their free speech right. I think that they should have had the security to put the situation under control while the trial continued in the courtroom. So that didn't make sense to me at all. Maybe I just got it all wrong, but it just didn't make sense to me. That would be my Tabata, my first Tabata on this topic.
Mr. Kunney, we will let Cole come live because
she will get her two Tabata today. Because
go ahead, Mr. Kunney, your Tabata of the week.
My Tabata of the week, I think it would be something surrounding the same code issue. I read that the former defense minister signed a promissory note to pay back the money, $500 per month. And somebody did a calculation that at that rate, it would take 150 years for the money to be fully paid. And, it was just kind of funny. I think it's just Tabata.
Call.
So I think for me, I don't know if it happened this week or late last week, but the Tabata of the week is the president appointing someone to manage an airport without regard to the terms of reference of an airport manager. Because the person went to a vocational school and learned how to wash small aircraft and, oil propellers and things like that. That is really, for me, it was the lowest point for our country. We've already been humiliated by not having power, not having resources. Instead of scouting the most innovative talent that they could find in the diaspora, because that's where he went. I mean, he could have found someone like this working at Spriggs. Why even go all the way across the ocean? Recruit a diaspora person. See who's working at some management level at JFK that's from Liberia, or at Twin Cities International Airport, or Hurstfield Jackson at a management level, because there's different aspects of managing an airport, and at least that person would have leadership at an airport, even if it's not the overall general manager, and be able to adapt, those skills. But you take someone who doesn't even supervise people, and that went to a vocational school for troubled youth, and say, okay, this person went to a vocational school for troubled youth. Since we're anti-education, this person will solve the problem. That for me is the greatest Tabata, and I'm questioning if we even respect the country anymore.
Thank you. My Tabata of the week is I saw a list. They say the richest Liberian, and they were putting figures, and that was making it round. People were discussing it. I didn't even click on the video because I saw that as complete Tabata. Let's get our viewers. Viewers, what do you think is your Tabata of the week? Let's see who is giving us Tabata here. Dave just said the greatest Tabata is in George Weah's Liberia. One is given a position before he or she goes to school to get the competence or qualification. Example, the law mayor, Jefferson Koyi. Well, if we don't have any more Tabata, we will go to, Maki Manu say SGC first calling Mr. Cummings supporter rats is complete Tabata. SF Kamara, my Tabata of the week is dwelling in the compound of the Temple of Justice where ANC and UP folks gathered booing at Cummings. Anderson Waller, my Tabata is why you can go to Liberia and do work, but just talking. Melody gave me visa.
Right.
Francis Wilson said, my Tabata, today's topic is somewhat outdated. The people who used to say that are now doing all they can to educate their children. Apparently, they too now are fully aware of what the lack of book can do to a country. Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank our viewers for also. Let's go around the room and get your closing comments. This time, let me start with Carl.
Yeah, so Dennis, I just want to say, on a positive note, that education is what you make of it. There's the education you're given and there's the education you give yourself. The purpose of education is so that you are empowered in your position to be able to interpret the world for yourself. And that is the key. Understanding things in your own context and for your own benefit. So as we move forward, let's all work for the advancement of Liberia and the Liberian people.
Thank you. Mr. Kunney.
Well, education basically, I think, is the integral development of the individual. It develops our thinking ability. It gives us different perspective, how to take care of ourselves and how to interact in society, how to solve society's problem. I think over the period, those of us that have been educated, we've not done a good job solving the problems for our country. And unfortunately, that has led many of our citizens to question the benefits from education. Their expectation of our education is to develop the society, to create benefits for the society that they as citizens will participate in and enjoy. And in most cases, most often than not, the people have been shortchanged in that direction, and they continue to ask whether that book will eat. My hope is that given that awareness, when given the opportunity, we, the educated people, should actually take our responsibility seriously and take the expectation of our people seriously. That we are not just there for ourselves; we are there to solve the problem that face the society. If you are in the medical field, do things that will solve the problems for our people in the medical field. If you're in the area of education, if you're in the area of agriculture, our people expect productivity from these sectors, so that our being there will make a difference in the lives of the people.
Okay. Or maybe you look at that. Nobody born with books. So instead of asking, you yourself go to school, right? That was it. All right. So there are few. Sam Wallow Tabata is Liberia non-valuing, respecting, accepting, and appreciating each other. Michael Jacob, that's my man from Bosu, say arresting a criminal and transporting him on a motorcycle to the police station. That's his Tabata. Mr. Sherif, let's conclude.
Yeah, so education is extremely important. My ethnic people, my people say, when you interpret the way we say it in Mandingo, is both people also like you, Dennis. When we say it in my language, is both people. We hold that sacred, and my religion as well. The religious teachers taught us the first verse that came down of the Quran was read. So education is so very important. So early on we're taught to memorize passages in the Quran. So that help us through when we go to regular like English school. So it's so very important. One thing that I like to say here is I was watching George Weah, I think it was on one of these platforms one time, and there was the late Mobutu Nyepan, the former the late Public Works Minister Mobutu Nyepan, they went on an inspection with the president, and they were building some roads, and the journalist was asking the president a technical question, and the president said, so they said, well, the road is supposed to, this church and this house is on the road that we're building now. So the people want us to not hit this area. So Mobutu said, okay, to the journalist, okay, when we get back, we'll answer the question. We will look into that and get back to you guys. But George Weah was there answering the technical question. He said to the public works minister, well, if the road can't, if you can't find a way, just get around this. So the minister said, he repeated, okay, we'll get back to you guys. We'll get back to the office and give you an appropriate answer. And the president repeated, if the people say, don't break their church, don't break their joke, put the road around it. That just goes to show that's not his area. He's not well versed. This man is a technocrat. Mobutu Nyepa went to school. He was an engineer. He had a degree in engineering from the University of Liberia. George Weah is not. I don't know what George Weah's degree is in, quite frankly. So he was answering questions for a technocrat, and that is the thing that education does for you. You know, little education, and you can think that you can override everyone else. He was supposed to defer to his public works minister. In that case, he did not. So all of what we're saying here is that no, it's not good to denigrate book. It's not good to denigrate educated people. It's not good to launch a full-on assault on the intelligentsia. It doesn't augur well for us. You know, who are your doctors? Are you going to take anybody in the street and put them in the JFK hospital just because, you know, you can't eat book? Are you going to take anyone and put them in the Ministry of Finance, you know, just because you can't eat book? I mean, come on, let's be serious. Let's be serious. This whole assault on education, this whole thing about book will eat, it's a joke. It's a joke. And these people know it. They know it. It's around political season that supporters of Weah said, you know, we don't eat book. We're not going to eat book. And so let's be serious. Let's be serious.
Mr. Sirleaf, you have the last word.
Thank you for the invitation tonight, and thank you to all my co-panelists. I'm really honored to have participated here with you. I just want to call on all of us Liberians and those in authority at any given point to invest in education. If we want to build our social, economic, cultural, upward mobility and develop our country, we have to do so with technical, competent, highly educated society. The African Development Bank has some statistics that points to no country has picked up, that says that no country has picked up over the last 20 years in Africa, at least to advance, you know, the examples they give, which has not developed its agricultural sector, for instance. And that requires education. It requires technical know-how, technical skills. Education, investment in education, the dividends does not show in the short run. It doesn't, you know, manifest in 5 years, 10 years, even sometimes decades, 20 years, 30 years. And so even in the international development field where I worked for many years, I still consult. Education, investment in education, all you have to do is look at UNICEF website and the calls they're making, you know, for investment in education. A lot of it is falling on deaf ears because, again, it's not sexy, it's not exciting to invest in education because then donors don't see the result right away. However, long term, it pays off, and it pays off big time. It helps a country to take off and take off for good. When we talk about Rwanda, the example we always give as a new Singapore in Africa is because Rwandese are very highly educated people. Give example of Kenya, the very highly educated people. Nigeria, with all its problem, is now the #1 economy in Africa, the very highly educated people. So let us educate our people. Let us invest in education and support our education policy, education infrastructure, and our educators. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the discussion. I want to thank our viewers as well. When we decided this topic, you know, I even had criticism. I said, Dennis, you guys are the one promoting these kind of ideas, you know, but this is a fair question that book will eat. Because you know when you are hungry, you know, Maslow talk about the hierarchy of needs. So when you are really devastated, and I really started hearing about this more during the war, when all that matters to you was food. So food became so important. Even when we moved to the United States, and you go to a party, people are going, even though they have food, but they have that war mentality. When they are going, they are packing foods because we have come from a society where you didn't know what you're going to eat the next day. So if you have food today, you should keep it for the next day. So based on that, and people knowing the importance of food, said, well, the #1 thing, because we are suffering, is we want to eat. Everything else is secondary. And so in that case, book and all the things that come with book, let's eat fresh. So one of the reasons people are asking the question too is things are hard. And I was in Nigeria in the refugee camp, Oru. I was so hungry that I wish the thing that I was running through my mind, I can't think of that today. And you won't believe what I was thinking. The plane was flying over me, and I was praying for this plane to crash, fall down, so that I can get food from the people's pocket or money from the pocket so that I can eat.
Yeah.
I was desperate. So in that case, all I'm concerned of is to eat for the next day. So the bottom line, what I'm saying here is, if conditions improve, maybe people will start thinking above food, would not be quoting things, but truly we should eat books, because my high school say education for the betterment of mankind. But if the education, if what the people are saying, if we are trained to, when we are educated, we can go to the village, because our education does not tell us the name of the trees that in my village. It doesn't tell me the names of the animals there. It tells me the names of the trees in America. So when I'm educated, when you are educated, you don't fit in your village anymore, and so you have to leave. So the people in my village would not see the benefit of the education that I got from Morelia College, from other places. And so they would really ask me, wait now, I thought you were going to school to come back and help us. So I understand the point of miseducation. I think we should do something so that we can educate our people to solve the problem that we face. How come with all the education we still having the leak at Freeport? So if our education is not, if we are not trained to solve the problem that we are facing, the people who should benefit, or the country that's supposed to benefit from our education, is not going to benefit, and we're going to always be asked the question, your education does not mean anything to me as long my condition has not improved. I want to again thank you all for coming, and keep tuned to Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. I want to also announce that FOL Virtual July 26th program is coming up. Every year, July 26th, we have a virtual Independence Day program. This year is going to be on Sunday, July 24th, I believe. But things are still being worked out. We have our Independence Day orator and all the beautiful things. You don't want to miss it. It's here on Focus on Liberia. By far, the best platform ever in the history of Liberia diaspora education, and nobody can argue that. Again, we don't end any broadcast without playing our song that says, we are all Liberians. Why? Because it's the only country we love, man. And let's do whatever it takes. Whether you believe we can eat book or we can't eat book, we are all Liberians. Good night and God bless.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss.
We all are